Okay. Greetings again. We are here with Writing Your Life Story with Dave Bradshaw, and we're going to be going over what we covered a little bit last week and some new material today. So, why don't I give you a copy just so that you could follow along and decide if you want to get the book or not. So, we're doing this because
we want to leave our story.
That's it. You got it. That's reason number one. We want to leave our life story in writing for those we love, family, kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids if we're real lucky and optimistic about living a long, long life. Yeah, so that's one reason. The other reason is it's actually very therapeutic for ourselves.
Yes.
It's an exercise in getting what's inside us out onto the table.
My legs are short.
That is a great chair for you right there.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Nice rocker.
How much sleep, David?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, nice.
Good.
Thank you.
I want you to be comfortable. So getting it out is very healthy, very therapeutic, very healing. There's just something about writing it out. You own it. Speaking it to other people, you further own it. And, that's something that many people put off until it's too late. And so I'm campaigning that this become sort of a rite of passage for grandparents or people in their 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond, because it doesn't get any easier later as our memory can tend to fade and our health can fade. So why not do it now? And if we're going to do it now, why not do it with some type of systematic goal in mind? And I'll put my glasses out here. So if we don't write our life story, nobody else will. Unless you're a really big celebrity and we don't know about it, then a ghostwriter might come alongside you and say, can I write your life story? But most of us, our life stories of primary interest to our family and loved ones, not necessarily, but it could be something we publish and make available to the public. You just might have a story that is so compelling that it's got to be told, and it may be a Netflix movie. Who knows? You never know. Every movie on there is made, the ones that are patterned after true stories, after somebody's life. And so we all lead, on the one hand, very ordinary lives, and on the other hand, very extraordinary lives. And so we walk in that balance. So the first assignment that we gave out last week was to come up with a sort of a one sentence or a paragraph summary of what you want to be remembered for as kind of a theme for your autobiography or your memoirs. And that way the different parts of it can somehow fit together into a whole. The difference between a memoir and an autobiography is simply that the memoirs would be the more exciting points of your life that would be like the visible part of an iceberg sticking up, whereas the rest of your life underwater, you don't need to go into all the details, but so a memoir is an interesting point of your life, either in a certain time frame or in a certain travel trip that you made, or a certain part of your growth and evolution as a person that you think is interesting to tell, and likely will have some type of a point to it that you learn something from it, or in other words, this part of your life matters. Why does it matter to you, and why should it matter to other people? Did you learn a lesson? Did you discover something about yourself? What about it is worthy of recording? And so a memoir, whereas an autobiography can just be very chronological, not necessarily come to a specific point, memoirs tend to explain why that point that you came to matters to you and to other people. So, and then a spiritual biography, which we were going to incorporate into this as well, can tell the story of your spiritual evolution and where you started, where you are today, where you're headed toward, steps that you've gone through. And we're going to cover 4 stages of spiritual awakening that are talked about by many. In fact, I was impressed that last Sunday the new pastor quoted from Ken Wilber. If you remember, we talked about
I
that
love
as
that
well.
you sent
So
that link in.
I thought I immediately liked Betty. She's thinking along the same lines.
I like
Ken
the
Wilber
Forrest
is.
Gump.
Pardon me?
I like the Forrest Gump anecdotes.
Exactly, Forrest Gump and Ken Wilber about waking up, growing up,
Right.
cleaning up, and opening up. I think she gave the order slightly different, but hey, who's going to argue on the details? It's a process.
That's right.
And
That's
the point is
interesting.
that Ken Wilber is considered one of the leaders in what I would call the inner spiritual awakening that's going on worldwide right now. And Unity has really been on the forefront of that for decades. And it's exciting to see that it's now catching on with many other groups. Groups that in the past have been rather exclusive are now becoming more inclusive. We're discovering that there's really more things we have in common than things that we can disagree about. And isn't it much better to sit down with somebody, even from another faith or another wisdom tradition, and be able to say, you know, let's start with the golden rule. You know, love God, love your neighbor, and if you want to be radical, love your enemies, which is where Christ took it a step further than some of the other wisdom traditions. He said, you know, I'm going to give you the power through a spirit within you to love your enemies. In fact, who really is our enemy? If we're walking in divine love, virtually no one is our enemy anymore. And even those people that consider us their enemy, we're called to love them with an unconditional love, which pushes us beyond our human capability, but is possible because we saw it demonstrated. And enlightened folks all around are pushing that limit. So Ken Wilber is one of the people on the forefront of this inner spiritual awakening, along with many, many others. And so it was good to hear her quote from him and see that, well, wise people think along similar lines. So that's good. But, okay, so our first assignment was to write out your, maybe make a note of that. It's in the book here on the first couple of pages. Your first assignment is to create a theme, a purpose statement for your autobiography. In a few, take some time to reflect on it, write it down as a paragraph, or maybe as an obituary. Last year I had a little brush with death. I shared with you last week I caught COVID and turned into a lung disease, and I ended up getting a double lung transplant about 11 months ago. So that was, and I died on the operating table and came back. So my purpose on earth is not over with yet, but it was an exciting experience, and I'm just grateful every day that for every breath I take. We don't appreciate anything about our life until it's on the cusp of being taken away from us. Life is fragile, and we don't appreciate that until something reminds us of it. An accident, a death, a loss of some sort. And so it is during these times of loss and brokenness that we're actually put back together in a new way that allows us to continue to grow and evolve. So all of these things happen for a purpose, and it's a good purpose, I think. As Scripture says, all things work together for the good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So that's putting your mission statement together. Anyway, it prompted me to write on my obituary in two long sentences. And I encourage you to do the same, and that can kind of become your working thesis for it that you come back to when you're writing and say, does it relate to that? How does it further explain that story in more detail? And we're going to cover today at least one approach and maybe two approaches to writing your draft of your memoirs in a rather speedy fashion. That is, doing it and getting it all out and then going back and editing it later. There's some arguments for doing that. Okay, so we covered why to write our life purpose already for yourself and for your family. The resources needed would include either a 3-ring binder and some college line papers, or you can get, do what I did, which is to get a binder that has 4 or 5 different separate ones, because we're going to be writing about our early childhood, middle years of college and high school and college, and then our career, marriage, and family, and then part 4 will be our retirement. So you may be working on writing on one thing and you have a thought. Well, you want to do something with that thought, don't just let it go. You want to at least write out a little something, I'm going to write on this, and put it in the right section so that later on it's easier to organize it chronologically. So that what you end up with, which I did in the last class I taught over at the senior center, put my own autobiography together. So this is the story of my life, and it's in 50, in the table of contents, 50 of the 150. In the back of this book are 150 questions, prompting questions for you to choose from as a menu. You can go through them and see if you can find about 12 or 15 in each of the 4 seasons of life that resonate with you, so that you can write on that subject, or you can come up with your own prompting questions. You don't have to use mine, but I chose mostly all the ones that I had written there and came up with 51 myself. Well, actually 50 plus the letter that I wrote to the donor family as one of my memoirs, of great gratitude to them for their donation. And then you can incorporate photos and other things that you may have that will make it more interesting to read for your family, and of course everybody likes to see their picture, etc. So I printed up just 20 of them, which covers my 4 daughters, 10 grandkids, and 3 great-grandkids, and that'll be their Christmas gift this year.
Dude, it's so cool.
Pretty easy, huh?
Yes.
Now,
Love it.
it's sort of like doing a will, or having having it written out what you want to do toward the end of life. It's just good. It feels good to have it done.
Did you have it printed, or you had your own press?
No, I sent it out, and
the factory press?
That's my little publishing company that lays up stuff out and edits and stuff like that. I sent it to a little place. It's called. It's actually in your book here. Glasses again. Smart Press, I think it is. Let me see. And you just tell them how many pages. Here it is. Yeah, it's called smartprint.com. So if you send them an electronic file, a Word document or something, and a cover, they'll print it in a perfect bound little booklet of however many pages you want it to be. It could be 50 pages, 100, mine was 140. Depends on how big the type is, how many pictures, all that,
Smart Press?
Pardon me?
Mm-hmm. It's in there, okay.
Yeah. So that's where we're going with the class, is that you write out, get these memoirs out, then work with somebody to edit them, because you're going to need that. We're going to talk about how important editing is today, and then proofread it and get all the bugs out, etc. Chop it down with a machete, etc. And then get it printed, and bada boom, you have a wonderful keepsake for your family. Now there are things online, companies online, where you can do it. You've maybe seen some ads for it, and they'll send you a question every week or however often you want to take time to write it, and when you send the answer, they'll send you another question, and they'll compile it and do the book. But my style of doing it is they're deciding on which questions to ask. Here, you get to pick from a menu. So I think there's a little more diversity that you can include. Plus, they don't think they include much of anything on your spiritual biography. That's not on a lot of people's, radar screen to talk about that. But it's kind of hard to ignore it for people who are spiritual. So we might as well include it. All right, so that's kind of the big picture of where we're going, what we want to do. I suggested that you can start and do these in any order you want. Some people prefer to start with their childhood memories and work chronologically. In this little manual that I did, we decided to start on the first class from retirement and work backwards in time, because those are like what happened last year. Well, those members should be pretty easy for you. What are some of the best memories that you have from last year? Start with the more recent and work backwards to get the grease, the skids grease for your mind working. And then once you start thinking about it, it starts bringing all kinds of other memories. Your brain is very connected, and your subconscious starts connecting with that. So that's the way that the handbook is set up. So it starts off at retirement and works backwards in time. And there are examples from my memoir for each of the 8 classes, and there's 2 classes for each season of life, the way I did it. So in week 2, on the topic of retirement. By the way, did you guys get started on yours? How I want to hear what if any progress you made in the last week.
How long you got?
Oh wow, we got the whole hour and a half.
Let's hear it.
So I started this a long time ago.
Oh wow.
So I was able to just pull it out. It starts off with the life of me, born, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
A whole lot of family information. Whole lot of outlooks of my life there. When I started getting to youth on when I noticed my personality. So there started to be a change in outlooks through it.
As a child now?
As I would call it, adolescence.
Adolescent now.
Yeah, adolescence. I got a little cocky. Thought I understood all my family dynamics and chose to stay outside of that. Then I went into some traumas, which you said everybody wants to write about those. So I kind of just said this happened, this happened, this happened with no details.
Right.
Because I knew some point I'd come and write on them if I wanted to. I pretty much did my own, I call it defamation of character. I love to cook, so this is how I like to spend my time. This is what's relaxing to me. Then I had a pregnancy at 13, so that's when I turned into the teen, the mom, the friendships, the support you get, the village of people you create as family, outside of your real identity family. How I connected through, then I went into the career section. And the reason it never went any further than 4 pages was it was totally boring. It bored me to death.
It's like, why should I do this?
Okay.
Okay.
That's okay. That's perfectly good. I'm excited that you got 4 pages.
Yes.
And the fact that it bores you is part of what we're going to cover today on how to punch it up a bit. And so that's fine. What you started working on was a summary autobiography of your life chronologically.
And short, as short as I could make it, because I didn't know it was called memoirs. I didn't know that there were things that you made for the highlights. This. I didn't realize those were 2 different things. So
yeah, that's okay. I'm glad to see that you did. So did you write that all at one sitting, or a little bit at each time, a couple days, or how did you do it?
I did some profiles of caretakers, schooling, my healthy boundaries and lifestyles, some personal letters that were given to me over the years that directed thoughts and actions. I did a timeline.
Okay, that's good.
I did that, something like that.
That's good.
So there were
Okay.
good events and not so good events,
Okay.
or growing events,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
where you stalled in
Mhm.
life and didn't have a lot of spiritual growth.
Mhm.
So there's some spirituals
Interesting.
in mine, just because I grew up Catholic, so I grew up with a strong spiritual
Yes.
diversion away from Catholicism. So I knew I was going a different way, but I still
Sure.
had strong convictions. I did my parents, who played victim roles, and this is my mom, this is my dad, this is the grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Again, pretty everyday stuff, but I was able to pull out personality traits that came from the environment I grew up in. I did find a really fun thing, a walk down memory lane
I
for
like
the
that.
year I was born. And I thought, oh, well, now that can make some of this dry, boring stuff a little fun.
Yeah.
I wrote a letter to my grandma, I wrote a letter to my mom, I wrote a letter to my dad. They're all gone. So it doesn't really matter, it was the writing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I did it for healing. So that was my main purpose, to do all that work, and that was about 8 weeks maybe. And during that time, I said, oh, I want to make it funny. So for your homework that I did was to come up with a theme.
Mm-hmm.
And so my theme is one for every decade. So I'm going to 70.
Okay.
So 0 to 70, and my first decade was off the grid but not off the path. Follow the yellow brick road, the road less traveled. So even as a little adventurer.
Mm-hmm.
And then my next decade is I shared that adventure with others, and we were all operated by the spirit of love. So that was 70s, in case you can't guess.
Mm-hmm.
Non-judgmental in the fact that we were all responsible for our own intentions. It's about the time that I realized that I could only control from my head to my toe, and everything else,
Not so much.
you're controlling yours, you
Yeah.
control yours. I'm not picking up anybody's way to control. Then in the next decade, 40s, is the choices you made direct your action. The choices made direct your action. And those actions then create your spiritual being. And that's when I learned a lot about service work and love and respect Mother Earth, and God, having some like graciousness in the world and not trampling through life. Then about 50-ish, believing that you are the holy child of God and it was all created for you. 2 parts of that is you're just a grain of sand and it's no big deal. And the other side of you are here and it is a big deal. And you need to pass that light to every person that you touch. And then 60s, walk softly, leave everything better because you were there. Breathe in life and it just awaits you. I was unsure what awaits you, but I'm positive there's something in the universe that awaits you, which was for me an adventure and travel. I just kept looking for something, and spiritually, I tried Buddhism, I tried all kinds of different formats of filling my spirit, so that was interesting. And now I think I'm at our higher selves begin with a better breath, and it's a spirit journey. So I left the physical, left behind, got rid of stuff, organized, compartmentalized. And so I guess I'm compartmentalizing my memoir.
Okay. It's yours. You can do it exactly as you want, and that's a good way to do it by decade. In fact, some people actually find that quite helpful because we do go through cycles about every 10 to 20 years and change our roles, our understanding level, our evolution, etc. So, bravo. So you got a good sort of a framework
Nice, right.
that you want to work on. Now you just need to.
I need
Get
to
into
write through that love for that decade
Mm-hmm.
and check back and say, did you really talk about where you came from and where you were at?
Good. All right. That's your story, and you're sticking to it.
The only story I got.
Yeah, exactly.
You like it or you don't.
Right.
So, how about you, kind sir? Did you make some progress?
Yeah, I did.
Good.
Didn't write as much as I wanted to, but I took 3 days to do some writing and wrote on some of the themes you had, and I kind of realized that the things that were important to me, almost to the heart, that I thought I would carry with me for the rest of my life, is not necessarily the case. Being unique, I always said I was really unique, and I felt different and unique, but that's not as important now. For some reason, as I started thinking about it, it's like, well, what does that mean? I mean, it just means you are a real person, that's all, and that it's not this great mystifying thing that you do. Being unique is just part of being a human being, is going about your life with what you've got and what you reflect from people and what you get and absorb. And so I use the uniqueness as a theme, but I don't as part of the theme, but it's not the most important thing. And so I wanted to be succinct because I have a tendency to be very flowery and wordy, which I do deliberately a lot, but I wanted to, like you were saying, make it easy for the reader to figure it out. And so I did one theme, one general theme, and maybe it's a little too general, but it covers things that I want to branch off from. Anyway, it was my theme was uniqueness with honesty of feelings. The truth is in how positive or negative those are. Use art as a reverence. Use humor as survival. Find common bonds with others and use collective imagination together. Search for the discoveries of the heart and inspiration to help others lead to an upbeat life, to develop and evolve. And so those are some of the things I want to write from and go back to and interject when I write the story. And what were the feelings about? I want to write down clarity, but then I want to add feelings in hopes that the feelings, the words become something more, manifest themselves more into my own ideas, developing that, and throwing a little fiction into it. I want to throw a little fiction into it. I don't want to be perfectly honest about my life.
Yeah, you're allowed, and that's the thing about writing it. As we'll cover, we're going to cover. I'm going to hand out a sheet here on writing memoirs, and then I've got another one on by a different perspective. But let me give you a copy of this. This is called Fast Draft Memoirs, and it's my summary of a book on the topic that I think will give us some good guidelines to get started with, because we are endeavoring to do this in about the next 8 weeks, and I'm saying if you can work 30 to 60 minutes a day. That would create about, be about 50 hours over a 8-week period to create your memoirs / autobiography. So, according to Rachel Herron, who's a accomplished writer, I think she's written several books. Her book on fast draft memoirs, she says, no one wants to hear about your perfect life. Square one, okay? That's boring. Or about how you've become victimized. Readers want to see the broken places in our life and compare them with their own cracks. And I thought that was a good way of putting it, that people are interested to read when people share their stories of how they hit a problem and they were broken, and how with God's help or with one way or another they put it themselves back together. When we name our shame and go deeper, we connect with others who resonate with our feelings. And so naming, that kind of stuck with me. When we name our shame and go deeper, people connect with us, because a lot of people, almost all of us, carry around some shame about something. And it could be shame that got laid on us that shouldn't have been there, but we still accepted it. It could be, religious views. Catholics are pretty good about getting shamed based on leading sinful lives and needing redemption. So whatever that shame is, to name it and to get it out on the table and to try to explain how we overcome it, people resonate with that, because that's a universal feeling. And so the more that we can share feelings that we have that are somewhat universal with others, the more people will relate with it. So that's tip number one, and this is a list of about 20 tips here. A memoir is a story about yourself, a slice in time, or theme-based. Memoirs should be based on truth. However, since no one's memories are infallible, they can change over time. It's valid as long as the likelihood of a memory is at least 80% representation of the truth. She just picked that number. Now, that's not to say that you can't write a memoir that incorporates fiction, but if you're going to be true to it being an actual memory of yours, it has to. She says the stink test is that it's at least 80% of what you can remember as being the truth, and I thought that was pretty fair.
Well, my question is it depends on what your filter was at that time.
Yeah.
Whether it's truth or not. If you
Right.
believe it to be truth,
Right.
let's just say a childhood
Mhm.
memory from 5 years old, when you're 50, you question it. But if you've believed it, it's real in here,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was real or not.
True. So that's why she says that their memories are not infallible, or they are infallible, or no one's memory is infallible, and they change over time. How you remember things now may be different than how you remembered it then. So here she makes the argument on why to write your first draft quickly. First drafts are always bad. So don't worry about that. Like you said, you read it and you said it's boring. That's okay. This is why editing is so vital. Revising as you go is not a good method for most people. That kind of surprised me when she said that, because that's the way I tended to do things. But then I'm not writing, it wasn't writing a book, it was writing for investment company and writing radio and TV commercials. So I would write, and for a TV commercial you got 60 seconds. So it's a pretty short thing. And so I do just go over it and see how I can say it better, fiddle around with it. So that's why this is a little, writing the memoirs was a little different. But she says, get it all out, good, bad, and ugly. Revising it as you go is not a good method for most people. It's better to write fast and then revise and edit it later. First of all, when you go and look at what you've written the next day, you're going to see it with a different perspective than when you're in the midst of doing it. So even if you just give it a day or two, And also having it done with other people is also helpful because they give you a good outside perspective. How long is an average book of memoirs? She says it can range from 20,000 to 100,000 words. An autobiography might consist of 40 to 60 memoirs of about 500 to 1,000 words. And that would be 25,000 to 50,000 word total. Mine, by the way, ended up being 25,000. So for 140 pages, 25,000 with pretty good sized type too. So you could put smaller type, but I wanted to be kind on my kids whose eyesight's not getting any better, just like mine. But so that gives you just some parameters, so that if you had a goal of writing an hour and could write 500 to 1,000 words a day, again, you could get it done in as little as 25 to 50 hours. But I think probably producing 500 words an hour is more realistic for most people, but some people can write 1,000, some can write more. It's not really a race, it's just a matter of being able to have a introduction, a middle, and a conclusion, and getting it done in an hour or so. You can take longer, but
And see, I didn't think that memoirs would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. To me, that's a story. But I always thought it was going to be some flippant thing that you could do, something outrageous out there to make
Right.
people think or whatever.
Yeah.
So I never looked at it.
Well, there's
that.
different schools of thought, and we're going to talk about, if we have time, both of them today.
Great.
Types of memoirs. Pastoral or family growing up memories, celebrity memoirs, travel memoirs, spiritual memoirs, food memoirs, grief, animal and pet memoirs, dysfunctional family, escaping a cult. I mean, there's I Will Survive, love and romance memoirs, relationships, workplace, career, exploration, adventure, addiction, humor, a call to action. There's almost as many different kinds of memoirs as there are experiences in life. So there's no, again, right or wrong. Some people do them on a theme, like one of these themes, and the whole book is just a series of memoirs about their adventures or their addiction or their workplace. An autobiography would include a little bit of most all of this, because likely it's happened throughout your life. You've done most all of this stuff. Maybe you did or didn't have a dysfunctional family, or maybe you weren't in a cult, or maybe you are now. Who knows? Anyway.
So
one
a
man's-
matter of perspective.
I know. Yes. Well, as long as it's a non-violent cult. Okay. She advises coming up with, I remember I said a 1 sentence or 2 sentence summary. She says, come up with a 6-word story. How's that for a challenge?
Yeah.
And she uses an example of for sale baby shoes never worn as a summary of a memoir. In my case, I said, I guess if I were to put mine into just 6 words, it would be the adventure, finding God's love everywhere, which is the mission statement, or my life mission statement. And so if I were to put it in 6 words, that would be my 6 words. So that's a real challenge, to try to bring it all the way down to 6 words. So you can chew on that one a little bit and see what you come up with. The important part is capturing your unique essence, as you were saying, your uniqueness, and explaining how you've changed or evolved over time. This is what interests people. For example, I started out blank and ended up blank. That's of interest to people. That you started out something and never went any further with it is not that interesting. Or that you ended up being, brilliant humorist is of no interest unless we know how your path to get there was and how I might follow that similar thing and come up with the same result. This is what's called your character arc, explaining where you started and where you want to end up. And so if you ever hear that term used, character arc, that's what it's referring to. Next, write a 2-sentence elevator pitch summarizing what you plan to cover in your memoir or autobiography. That's basically what I was talking about with the 2 sentences. Expanding your 6 words into a paragraph. And so now you're starting the process of expanding it. And so I used the example for my autobiography. My elevator pitch would be, our precious children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren need true elders who can help teach them how to overcome adverse circumstances by learning more about how we've overcome them. I know that's a long sentence. That's sentence 1. And number 2, understanding why what has happened in my small life matters and helps me focus on my larger true life purpose, practicing unconditional love toward everyone and everything. So, those are my 2 sentences that would be my elevator pitch for why it'd be worthwhile reading my story of my life. So, if a person resonates with those, then they may be interested to read it. If they don't, then they won't. So, but the idea is to make it interesting and make you want to learn more about it. You know, a good writer leaves you, or a good speaker leaves you wanting more, to tell more, not like that's too much information. You know, kids have this, TMI, too much information. You don't want to leave readers with that. As soon as you leave them with that, you lost them, and you're probably not going to get them back. So you want to leave them with short, and we're going to get into that, pithy type things. All right, on side 2, the next step is to outline your book. If you're writing memoirs or a spiritual biography, you might consider somewhere between 8 and 10 chapters. So that fits in with your decade thing, if you want to do it like that. For an autobiography.
Like an outline.
Yeah, so you can do it with an outline. This is one method to do it. And that's why I gave you the 4 sections of life. So that serves as your large outline. And then breaking it down into 12 or 15 of the prompting questions on specific topics within that time frame to come up with your 50 or so short memoirs and chapters. Some are going to be longer than others. I remember I was writing on some of them and I couldn't get much more than a page. But I didn't think it needed to be more than a page. If it said what it needed to say, it doesn't have to be big, long, diatribes on explaining all the minute details. If it was like, what was your favorite food? Well, my favorite food was, my mom made these cookies called Ranger cookies, and they were the most delicious things in the world, with corn chips and walnuts, and oh my God, I lived to chow down on those with milk, So that was my favorite food. What more are you to say about it? The ingredients in it, how much I loved it, and so it wasn't a lot. But there were a few other foods that I like and a lot that I didn't like that I had to eat. You probably had maybe similar experience with you growing up. Anyway, okay, so for the autobiography, I suggest 40 to 60 chapters that can be chosen from the prompting questions in the book. So that's part of the main reason for the book, is for you to be able to mull over that. Next, you need to decide your story structure. Typical would be what is known as the 3-box structure, which would be the beginning, the introduction, the introduction, beginning, the middle, and the end. Or to say what you're going to say it, and then say what you said and why it's important. That would be 3 boxes that you're putting your story into. An alternate would be what's called a 4-box structure, which would have an introduction, a reaction, and then sort of like a part 2 to the story would be the action, and then the resolution. She says, and uses the example, that this is used a lot in screenwriting, where you have what looks like the first story, but then there's a story within the story that goes beyond that. That's part 3, and then the resolution of it. You know, if you get good at spotting that, you can almost see where a story's going, and you know, you can see where you're at in the story by whether it fits into which of those 4 categories. So, you know, she says it's good to decide on your story structure. Some of it just happens subconsciously. Sometimes it's good to think about it. The other author we're going to look at says it'll find itself, so don't worry about it. So I don't want to put too much emphasis, but anyway, the 4-box structure has an introduction that contains your story hook and sets up what you want to cover and why somebody should take time to read it. Second, the reaction part would lay out the first plot, which likely would have some kind of downfall in it. Third leads to the reevaluation or a second plot, which would have some action in it. And then the fourth, the solution, would go into the 4th part of as a resolution. So these are pretty predictable. People tend to sort of expect this in writing, that if all you did was do an introduction to something, they would be left hanging. You know, you could, I suppose, skip to the introduction and then skip to the resolution, but then people are saying, well, how did you get there? So it's just sort of the normal way of our thinking, whether it's 3 or 4 boxes or structures.
And wouldn't you want to make them think?
Yeah.
I mean, by
Well, you want them to
skipping
think, yeah.
something of, wow, I'm not sure how they made that decision.
Yeah.
Or you want to tell them how you made the decision. I'm not sure.
Well, I think there's different ways to do that, and sometimes it's better to give the reader more credit that they can figure things out. And I mean, now if you look at the way a lot of the shows are structured, like on the streaming networks, is that, you know, they start off with something from the past or the future, and then you got to figure this out, and they make you really follow the thing close, or else you're lost in it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's in a way, it's a way to write that makes it force you to stay very connected to it closely. But you know, there's other stories that are very classic. You know, It's a Wonderful Life, okay, etc., that follow a very, you know, this structure, this 4-box thing. So I don't think there's a wrong way, whatever fits your style. But she's just saying this is a very widely used and what readers tend to look for. And okay, so now she says, after you've come up with your short sentence, your longer paragraph, your story structure, your etc., now you're ready to start actually writing the book. At first, don't worry about the chronology. Set aside 40 to 60 minute blocks of time daily if possible. Almost all writers agree on that. Your writing will be better some days, worse other days, but don't trust your moods. Just do it. It's sort of a discipline like exercise. Some days you'll feel like, oh no, I'm not in the mood. But if you want to get those pounds off and get them toned up, you do it. The same with writing. Just keep showing up and get it done. Shoot for 500 to 1,000 word count daily. So just so you know, like if you write on a line sheet like this on one page, usually that's about 200, 250 words. So 500 would be front and back, and 1,000 would be 2 pages, front and back, depending on how big you're writing. Just to give you some visual idea of how much that is. Real writers are like this. do not love writing. They hate it. So if this seems very counterintuitive, that, oh my God, it's time to write again, it's not like anyone, including professional writers, wake up and say, oh boy, I get to write today. Because it's an excruciating process of thinking and putting it down, and does it make sense, and where is it going, and it's sort of like birthing a baby in a way. It's messy. The muse comes out as you do the work. So what happens is once you start writing, having had this double lung transplant, getting into the habit of exercising again afterwards was hard because I atrophied for like a year. And so I would get up, and I remember painfully walking to the swimming pool every day because swimming is one of my favorite ways to exercise. It's a good way to stretch and do water aerobics, and it's easier on your body, your joints and everything else. And so walking to the pool, I would be in pain. Then after doing the exercises, and then when I was allowed to start swimming again, walking back from the pool, I felt better. It was like miraculous. So eventually I thought, as I'm walking in pain, I'm doing this knowing that I'm going to feel better coming back. That's why I'm doing it. And that's the same in many ways with writing, is that it's just painful to get started, but you do it, and you do it because you have an internal deadline or something that's motivating you. You want to get this done. And consider one of the things she suggests, leaving home to write. Go to a park. Some people go to Starbucks. A library is a good place, nice and quiet, cool when it's hot out. The beach. There's a lot of distractions there, so I'm not sure. But some people, if the weather's nice and you can have some privacy there, without a bunch of kids and stuff running around. Anywhere that you can have some peace of mind. Avoid distractions of looking at your email or internet surfing. It's like turn your dinger on your phone off while you're doing this, or your ringer, so that, whatever it is will wait. Unless you're a brain surgeon, you have to be on call or something, So try not to be distracted. Consider listening to music when you write. A lot of times I'll put on meditative, new age type, instrumental, classical music. In fact, it's proven that Baroque music actually lowers the brain waves and makes it easier for you to learn things and read and absorb them. I learned that from a professor in college. He would have Baroque music playing in the background while he's teaching. And it was very cool. Okay, so don't worry about not liking it. It's universal. Meditation is another useful tool in writing. Why? Because most people are not used to thinking about one subject for more than 60 to 80 seconds at a time. I thought that was an interesting statistic.
Yeah.
It's even gotten worse with the TikTok age and everything. If you can't say it or do it in 30 seconds, people don't really think about how to get to the bottom line anymore. They just want somebody to deliver the bottom line to them, not waste their time. But writing is different. You want to muse. You want to think. You want to reflect and go deeper. Meditation is like push-ups for the brain. I thought that was a good image. You make the muscles of your brain get stronger by pushing them. And anybody who's sat for 20 minutes of meditation daily, let alone an hour. I sometimes visit the Quaker church here in town, and they have, up on University, they have their Sunday service is a 1-hour meditation service. There's no leader, there's no message, there's no songs. It's basically everyone in a circle quietly meditating for an hour. And if you feel like the Spirit is moving you to stand up and say something, you stand up, speak your piece, sit back down. It's not open for discussion or debate. everybody just goes back into the meditation. It's really quite a interesting experience. But you know, I had gotten used to roughly 20-minute sits for meditation. I'll tell you, an hour really pushes you to your limit of like, you know, you start thinking, you know. But it's all good because it pushes us out of our comfort zone, and you know, isn't that really what life is about? So it's like push-ups for the brain. Simply sit still, breathe deep, allow yourself to get distracted, and then bring your focus back. So it's okay to be distracted in meditation, but you need to have either a prayer or a word or something that helps you bring your focus back. If you can do this even 5 to 10 minutes a day to establish a new practice, that will help you write and have a more peaceful life. So that's my per plug for meditation. Be visceral in your writing. That is, talk about your physical reactions that relate to your emotions on the page versus simply intellectual facts. So this means, how did that experience that you're describing make you feel? And using emotional feeling words draw people in. There's even a book which is known as an emotional thesaurus. I don't have one, but I'm thinking I might look into getting it. She says it's a recommended book for writers to have that allows you to read how to express something a little more detailed with this
Well, that's
thesaurus.
where you hook them.
Yeah.
Is on an emotional level.
Right.
So the more emotional words, when
Yes.
you talk about action, nouns, verbs, making them count when you use one,
Mm-hmm.
it's all about what emotional button did you
Right.
want to hit.
Exactly. Very true. Be specific with your details. Apply things that are both individual and universal. The more specific, the more universal, and if possible, include some character dialogue. If you can remember actual dialogue that went on when you're telling a story. You know, like let's say you're telling a story about how your parents were always at odds, and you can remember one argument where mom said this and dad came back with that, and you left crying into your bedroom because, you know, you took it personally that, you know, that
You were the cause.
yeah, you were the cause of it or something. So include some character dialogue. Next.
I love that. Real quick, my parents would fight in
Mm.
Polish. So
Oh.
when I grew up, people say, "Oh, you speak Polish?" I go, "You don't want to hear any of it."
Mm.
I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next, revise your first draft to make sure your story is true to the theme. So then you step back. This is after you get it all out and true to your theme and overall message. Print it out at this point so that you can take a bird's eye view of it. Don't worry about small edits or spelling at this point. That's to be done later with a copy editor. So she's very much in favor of you not even trying to be an English teacher with it. Your job is just to make the story flow and then let somebody else pick it apart grammatically, unless you're really, really good at that. Redo your story and perhaps add some more setting details. You know, sometimes we're so busy telling the story that we didn't explain the setting of it, and that helps people visualize your story better. And lastly, this is the best time in history to be a self-published writer. It's never been any easier. There are so many different varieties of ways to do it. When your draft is done, hire someone for your final copy editing and cover design. She's very much, this is particularly if you're going to put it on Amazon. Okay, if you're going to release it for the general public. You don't want to put out something with typos, you know, in the public arena, because it reflects poorly. In fact, forgive me if there's any typos in this, but anyway, a good program for doing this formatting of your book, once you have it in a Word document, you want to format it so that it's got pages and stuff like that all laid out right, is entitled vellum.pub. And lastly, your story matters. That's why we're here, because your life matters. Your story has got some very, very unique aspects to it, and we're hopeful that I can help you pry it out of you and get it out
Right.
with these prompting questions and or other ones that you come up with. So, anything about this fast draft in 45 minutes? This is my one-page summary of the whole book, so save you from reading it. I tend to be, that's sort of one of my things I do, is extract things down to the basic bullet points. So
That's probably the 2 stars that I've got are, one is the 6-word story,
Mm-hmm.
and the second one I starred with the elevator pitch,
Mm-hmm.
because what I keep hearing is get the words out,
Mm-hmm.
get it down to
Mm-hmm.
dot,
Right.
we finish later.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 things. My purpose of this course was, of course, the format and how other writers challenge it, because I didn't do very good with mine. So I was like,
Yeah.
I need other people's
Yeah.
ideas.
Yeah, let's see how we are on time. What time is it?
What time is it?
1:44, so we've got 15 minutes.
To 2?
hmm?
Is it 15 to 2?
It is 15 minutes to 2, yes.
Oh, I
Do you have a
to pick
date?
up my grandson. Yes.
Oh, yes, well, you better do that.
My love. But this is the complete for this week, so.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is cover the other next week.
Okay.
And because it's going to take at least 30 minutes or so to go through it, so don't want to go over too much. And so we will say this is good for this week. And we don't have to stop necessarily
Yeah,
class,
I
but
have to go.
you're excused.
It was nice meeting you.
Yeah,
it's nice meeting you.
See you next week.
Put on your grandma hat and
My friend had car problems, so that's probably what she's doing
Okay.
there.
Wow.
So I'm gonna go and hear this.
okay, you got that?
Yeah, I got that.
All right.
So
Were you able to do the money for the book this week or next week? Or
no, I'll
whatever?
give you. I'll give it
Okay.
to you now. Fix your stuff. It's 10 to 2, so
Yeah.
I thought we better.
I didn't want to keep running it back and forth, so I.
Back next time.
Okay.